All right. All right, gang. Talking about protein. Ma, where's the protein? Talking about protein today. Let me make sure I'm live. Make sure I'm live. All right. Do this. All right. I am indeed live. Hey, this is the first time, like, no hiccups, no nothing. So today we're going to be talking about protein. Bring up my presentation here. Keep me on track. All right. Protein 101. Ben Dearman, KDR Fitness, weight loss wizard. Let's dig into it. More protein. In general, that's my job as a transformation coach, as a diet expert, is really just telling women to eat more protein. That's pretty much what we do. Okay. We help busy women with their fitness, diet, and accountability. That's what people come to us. That's what women come to us for. All right. Generally speaking, when talking about diet, the first thing we get our clients, our female clients, to do is to eat more protein. That's like number one. It's number one because it gives us the best return on our time and effort investment. Right. Here are some of the miracles that I've seen with no other changes, just by increasing protein. I've seen 7-year-olds build muscle without lifting weights. I've also seen 30-year-olds build muscle without lifting weights. A lot of you are chronically under protein. And because of that, you're chronically under recovered. And so just by giving your body more protein, not changing anything else, we've seen muscle tissue go up. That's pretty crazy. Just by eating more protein, you build more muscle, which is wild, right? I've seen chronic inflammation disappear in a week. Poof, just like that. This has to do with a particular amino acid called albumin. We're not going to get into that. I've seen chronic injuries vanish. I've seen people come in with chronic knee pain, chronic shoulder pain, and a couple of weeks after eating a high protein diet or high protein diet, their pain goes away. I've seen depression and anxiety improve with no other changes. Just by eating more protein, I've had people report to me that their depression and anxiety is lower in a week just by eating more protein. Right. And that's just this is just some of the stuff that I could think of. Okay. But for sure, anytime that you increase dietary protein, you do increase the results that you're getting pretty much across the board for any results that you're talking about. Protein is the biggest dietary game changer. It's the lever that, when pulled, gives you the best return on your effort. It's the lever that, when pulled from a nutrition standpoint, gives you the best return on your effort. That's huge. Every system in your body benefits with higher protein intakes. And we're going to talk about all that stuff today. And I really want you guys to pay attention to those three statements. Protein is the biggest dietary game changer. It's the lever that, when pulled, gives you the best return on your effort. And every single system in your body benefits with a higher protein intake. Okay. All right. What we're going to be going over today. How much protein is too much? Kidney damage, cancer, we're going to talk about it. Why protein is important for weight loss, muscle building, anti-aging, and longevity. We're going to talk about protein and metabolic rate. We're going to talk about animal versus plant protein. We're going to talk about how to get more protein in, sneaky little ways on how to get more protein in from Coach Jamie, my wife. Lifting weights and protein intake, one or the other minimum. We're going to talk about that. I hate eating protein. What to do about it? There are very few females that we coach that are like, yay, more protein. Most of them are like, ah, shit, more protein. And protein recommendations and how to personalize it to you. We're also going to talk about a little something that we have for you guys in the group that's coming up in a couple weeks. It's all about protein. So some protein facts. High protein diet is 50% of your calories are coming from protein. Nobody, for the most part, unless you're on like a carnivore diet, nobody's eating a diet that is 50% protein. All right. Unless you're eating like 1,000 calories a day. The average person gets less than 20% of their diet from protein. So when I say 50% or when I say 20% of their diet from protein, that means that out of all the calories that they're eating, they're only getting about 20% of their calories from protein. Okay, that's what that means. Eating more protein doesn't mean that you're on a high protein diet. All right. Because remember, a high protein diet is a diet that is over 50% protein. General recommendations for protein intake are abysmally low. In fact, there are very few diet experts that actually work with people in terms of muscle building and weight loss that say that the current protein intakes are good. Almost everybody in my profession of body transformation and muscle building, fat loss, weight loss, etc., all say that the protein requirements put out by the government are too low. Protein intake changes throughout your lifespan and based on your lifestyle. Somebody who's more active, they need more protein than somebody who's less active. Somebody in their 60s needs more protein than somebody in their 20s. An active person needs more protein than an inactive person. All right. So there's just some protein facts. Okay. What is protein? Like, what is that magical thing that people say? Well, eat more protein, right? What is it? Protein is composed of amino acids. That's really what we want. When we're eating protein, we're really eating protein for the amino acids. That's really what we're looking for. Okay. Amino acids are the building blocks of all life and biological structures, as well as serving as key neurotransmitters. All right. People will say everything in your body is made up of protein. In reality, everything in your body is made up of amino acids. That's really how it looks. All right. There are three classes of amino acids. There are essential amino acids, there are non-essential amino acids, and there are conditionally essential amino acids. Essential amino acids, these are amino acids that you must get from your diet. You cannot make these from other amino acids. Non-essential amino acids means that, so there's roughly like 25, I think, amino acids, not important in any stretch of the imagination. All right. Out of those roughly 20 some amino acids, there are some that are essential, some that are non-essential, and some that are conditionally essential. The non-essential amino acids, I think there's like 13 or so. Again, don't quote me on this, and none of it's really that important. But out of those roughly 13 non-essential amino acids, your body can make different amino acids out of those. But for the essential amino acids, you must get those amino acids from your diet. That's why they're called essential, because your body cannot make them. All right. Conditionally essential is in certain periods of time, like let's say you have an injury, there's going to be amino acids that are more important when you have an injury versus when you don't have an injury. All right. So that's the conditionally essential, is that they are essential based on conditional scenarios. All right. Amino acids are essential for brain health because of neurotransmitters. Amino acids are essential for brain health because of neurotransmitters. If your diet is low in protein, I can guarantee, well, I can almost guarantee that you're going to have some mental health stuff. All right. Neurotransmitters are essentially the way that your body communicates inside of your brain to itself. All right. Neurotransmitters, kind of complicated to explain, but it's basically just the way that your brain is kind of communicating to itself. All right. Anything grown has protein in it. So anything biological has protein in it. All right. Wood has protein in it. You can't eat wood, but it's got protein in it. Cauliflower, protein in it. Apples have protein, right? A lot of people are actually eating more protein than what they think they're eating, but they're not looking at all those different things we're going to talk about later. Protein is essential for keeping and building muscle. You cannot build muscle, you cannot keep muscle without protein. And finally, chicken is not protein, okay? Chicken has protein in it. Chicken is meat or poultry. Just like plants are not carbs. Plants are plants. Plants have carbs in them. So what that means is if you're supposed to eat 150 grams of protein per day, that doesn't mean that you eat 150 grams of chicken per day, because chicken has protein. It is not protein. All right. That's what that means. Okay. It means you're going to eat enough chicken to be able to get to 150 grams of protein. All right. How much is too much, or the dangers of a high protein diet? I'm going to preface this with saying there are a lot more dangers with a low protein diet than there are with a high protein diet. All right. There are no dangers in eating a high protein diet for the average person. Now, if you have certain things that are wrong with you, like you have some kidney issues or something along those things, well, you're not the average person then. Okay. So you need to be a little bit careful with how much protein you're having. But really, your doctor can advise you on this. All right. If your doctor has not specifically said to you, you need to be careful how much protein you're eating, you don't need to be careful how much protein you're eating. And actually, I'd even go a step further. If your doctor is telling you you should be careful how much protein you're eating, I would encourage you to reach out to a nutritionist because doctors are not the best educated when it comes to diet and nutrition. So if a doctor is telling you that you need to be careful with your protein intake, that's not necessarily in their wheelhouse. So I would highly encourage you to reach out to a nutritionist to find out specifically why, and then go from there. Okay. But as far as the average person goes, no dangers in eating a high protein diet. All the research that shows kidney damage with a high protein diet was done on pre-existing kidney issues. So if you have a pre-existing kidney issue, maybe you want to talk to somebody about eating a high protein diet. If you don't have a pre-existing kidney issue, eating a high protein diet will not cause you to have a kidney issue. In fact, the research says the opposite. A high protein diet is protective of the kidneys. Research has shown intake upwards of 3+ grams per pound of body weight are safe and beneficial. That means that for a 200-pound person, that would be 600 grams of protein. None of you are eating remotely close to that. All right. None of you will need to eat remotely close to that. Typical recommendations for intake are around 0.6 to 0.8 grams per pound. Again, practically no one hits that. All right. That's about 150 grams for a 180-pound person. I would love if people just got that much protein in, but most people don't do that. There is weak science to show red meats cooked at high temperatures are carcinogenic. Carcinogenic means to cause cancer. So there is weak evidence, there is weak science to show that eating, red meats cooked at high temperatures can potentially lead to cancer, certain types of cancer. This is because of certain end products that happen with heating protein at high temperatures. And I say weak evidence because there are a lot of confounding variables in these studies, namely how they are done. A lot of them are self-reporting versus double-blind controlled, which is kind of the gold standard. Self-reporting is like the worst type of research. Also, sample sizes and populations that they use. So a lot of the research that says that eating red meat causes cancer, a lot of the people that are in those studies, they're eating processed meats. And when you take out the red meats, take out the processed meats in someone's diet, their risk of cancer drastically decreases. So it's not so much, it's basically a correlation of people that tend to eat a lot of red meat cooked at high temperatures also tend to eat a lot of processed meats as well. But it's mostly linked to the processed meats, not the actual like animal protein. Okay. Most of these risks can be alleviated via marinades, cooking at lower temperatures, indirect cooking versus direct cooking, eating more veggies and less processed meat, because that is the real culprit, is a low vegetable intake and a high processed meat intake. Not great, right? But a high vegetable intake tends to offset a lot of those things. Also, a low processed meat intake also tends to offset a lot of those things. The better question is how much is too little? That's the better question. That's the question you really should be asking, right? Too little is arguably anything below that 0.6 to 0.8 grams per pound of body weight, okay? Most people are way below that. Dangers of a low protein diet. This is only some of the dangers. If I listed all the dangers, we'd be here for like another 20 minutes. Mood swings. This has to do with neurotransmitters. Skin, hair, and nail problems. This has to do with amino acids. So a lot of times when we have a woman comes to us and they do have weak, brittle nails, they have dry, flaky, patchy skin, and they have some hair problems, whether it's brittle hair or losing their hair. As they increase their protein intake, they do see a very, very profound change, but that change happens over months. All right. Weakness and fatigue. So people eating a low protein diet tend to feel a lot weaker. They also tend to feel a lot more tired. Inflammation. Low protein diet leads to an increase in inflammation. This is from albumin. I was talking about that earlier. Low protein diet leads to a depressed immune system, which means you get sick more often. It takes you longer to heal. Takes you longer to heal and recover from things. Low protein diet will lead to muscle loss. Nobody keeps their muscle eating a low protein diet. So less protein you eat, more muscle you lose. Low protein diet will lead to bone loss. Nobody wants that. And a bunch of other really shitty things that ultimately you don't need to worry about, but you probably feel. So you should probably eat more protein. All right. Okay. Why is protein important for weight loss? All right. Protein is important for weight loss for a few key reasons. There are many, but these are just a few of the big ones. Okay. I'm going to grab some water real quick. So, number one, HEC, or thermic effect of food. Protein takes 20 to 30% more calories to digest than fat or carbs. So, when you eat something, whatever that thing is, let's say it's a banana, and that banana gives you about 100 calories. Okay. That banana costs a certain amount of calories for you to break down. So as soon as that banana goes into your mouth and you start chewing, you are spending calories. You're spending calories on chewing. Once you swallow that once you swallow that banana and it goes into your system, then you start to spend calories on digestion and moving that banana around. As that banana gets moved around and it gets pushed through your digestive system, eventually you're going to excrete it. You're going to poop it out, which takes energy. All right. So the act of eating something, the act of digesting that thing requires energy to be spent by your body before you can get the energy from that food. So when you have that 100-calorie banana, you're not really getting 100 calories from it. You're getting basically whatever it costs to digest that food taken off the benefit of the banana. All right. So what does that mean? So 100 calories from protein, you're going to spend about 25 calories to digest those 100, which means that you net 75. 100 calories from carbs, you're going to spend about 10 calories to digest it, which means you net 90. And 100 calories from fat, you're going to spend about 5 to 0 calories to digest it, which means you net about 95. So a diet that's higher in protein, because it requires more energy to burn that protein, means that it has a higher thermic effect of food. Means you are literally burning more calories eating that protein, eating 100 grams of protein or 100 calories of protein than you would from eating 100 grams or 100 calories of carbs. All right. So that's one of the reasons why protein is important for weight loss, is because the more protein that's in your diet, the more calories that you're burning to digest that protein, which means the more calories you're burning from rest, which also means the more calories you can eat and lose weight. All right. So more protein equals more calories that you can eat because of that thermic effect of food. And just remember, the thermic effect of food essentially just states it costs more energy for your body to digest protein than it does to digest carbs or fat. So more protein, more calories you can eat. If you take that a step further, a 2,000 calorie diet that has 40% protein would be about the same as an 1,800 calorie diet at 30% protein. So it means you're going to eat an extra 200 calories. Yes, it has to come from protein, but it does also mean that you're going to need that you get to eat an extra 200 calories, right? Why protein is important for weight loss? Because muscle loss while dieting is incredibly bad. All right, let's get into that. Actually, we're going to get into this first, and then we will get into the muscle building. So, no, we're going to get to the muscle building first. I'm going to move this around. All right, so muscle loss while dieting is bad. So muscle loss while dieting, let's talk about it. Very bad to lose muscle while you're dieting, okay? Because muscle burns calories. That is essentially the thing in your body that burns the most amount of calories. Muscle is a primary organ that determines how many calories you burn during the day, i.e. your metabolic rate, right? There are lots of things that make up your metabolic rate. There's like 4 to 5 categories depending on what you want to look at. But one of those things is the thermic effect of food. All right. That makes about 10 to 15% of the total amount of calories that you burn. More muscle equals more calories burned and easier time keeping the weight off. Right. So on average, when somebody loses 10 pounds of weight, they're going to lose about 1 to 3 pounds of muscle. Okay. On average. If somebody is on GLP drugs, they're going to see a much larger increase in muscle. So for the 10 pounds of weight that they lose, it might be 5 or 7 pounds of muscle. right? Also, to be clear, smaller people need less muscle than bigger people. So a smaller version of yourself will most likely have less muscle than a larger version of yourself. So if you have somebody who's 250 pounds and they go from 250 down to 150, they don't need as much muscle to move themselves around at 150 that they do at 250. So muscle will naturally go down. All right. We don't want it to go like as much as possible. We want to try and preserve as much muscle tissue as we can, with the understanding that as we lose weight, muscle tissue is going to go down no matter what. So we want to try and mitigate that as much as we possibly can. All right. The amount of muscle you lose during weight loss will have a direct relationship to how easy it is to keep the weight off of you in maintenance. All right. There are three primary ways to keep muscle while you are dieting. Number one is hard resistance training. I'm not talking about going to the gym and just lifting some weights. I'm talking about really hard resistance training. Okay. Typically, this is going to have to be done for at least 2 days per week. Second thing is higher protein diet. Okay, this would be around 40% of total calories. So if you're around 10 or 20% of total calories, you're probably going to be losing muscle tissue a lot faster than if you were at 40% when you're dieting. Okay, and also calories are basically not too low. So if you're in like a 50% calorie diet and you're eating a boatload of protein, since you're in a 50% calorie diet, there's a higher likelihood that you're going to lose more muscle tissue. All right, so when you do go in a diet, you want to be in about 10 to 20% deficit. If you don't know how to figure that out, you need to watch the last video that I did on how to figure out maintenance calories. Okay. We do want protein. I'm going to talk about this. We want protein around 30 to 40% of total calories. And you need to be working out. You need to be lifting weights hard. All right. So now we're going to talk about protein and metabolic rate, or why is protein important for weight loss? Why is protein important for muscle building? Okay. The more protein you eat, the more calories you burn. Protein cannot easily be broken down into fat and stored. All right. There is no direct metabolic pathway to take protein and directly convert it into body fat in order to be stored. So what that means, let's say that you need to eat 2,000 calories for maintenance. And let's say that you eat 2,500 calories, but those extra 500 calories come from protein. Well, normally we would say, geez, you're eating in a 500 calorie surplus. That means that you're going to gain a bunch of weight, but not so much with protein. If all of those extra calories come in from protein, you are still going to be eating in a calorie surplus, which means that you are going to be making some body fat, but you are not making a lot of body fat. Versus if you were to eat those extra 500 calories in carbs and or fat, you're going to be storing a lot more body fat, like way more body fat than you would if you got the 500 calories from protein. All right. And I want to go over these 2 points. I want to make sure you understand these. So protein cannot easily be broken down into fat and stored. There is no direct metabolic pathway for that. What has to happen is protein is broken down into amino acids. Before your body can do anything with it, it has to take protein and convert it into amino acids. All right. Then what it does is it converts those amino acids into glucose. Then if it needs to, it will convert the glucose into fat to be stored. So it goes protein, amino acids, glucose, fat. It cannot go protein, fat. All right. It has to go through a bunch of different processes and steps before it can actually get to the point where you are taking that protein, converting it to amino acids, converting into glucose, converting into body fat before you store it as body fat. All right. So I want to be clear. If your maintenance is 2,000 and you're eating in a 500 calorie surplus, you're probably going to gain some body fat, but you will gain much less body fat eating the extra 500 calories from protein than you will eating the 500 calories from carbs and fat. All right. You can absolutely get fat off of overeating protein, but it's very difficult. And it's probably more due to the fat associated with the protein than the actual animal protein. Protein from vegetable sources does this, but not as well as protein from animal sources. All right. So protein from animal sources beats protein from plant sources. All right. Classic yo-yo weight gain. What ends up happening when somebody loses weight? So I'm a big believer in most people are able to get the results that they want, but they're not able to keep the results that they get. 99.9% of people that I talk to, they have an issue keeping the results, not getting the results. Most people can get the results, it's that they can't keep the results. So here is a very, very, very classic thing that we see with our female members, that essentially explains why it's difficult to keep the weight off, and why when you gain the weight a second time, then when you try and lose the weight a second time, third and fourth time, it gets harder and harder and harder. All right. So Kelly weighs 250 pounds and has 150 pounds of muscle on her. Great job, Kelly. She loses 100 pounds via her diet. So she loses 100 pounds of weight via her diet, but she doesn't resistance train. She just does it through her diet. Okay. In the process of her losing 100 pounds, within those 100 pounds, she loses 25 pounds of muscle. All right. So she lost about 4 pounds for every 10 pounds of weight that she lost. Okay. Is that right? 4 pounds? Whatever. You get the idea. All right. So she lost 100 pounds and she lost 25 pounds of muscle. All right. So 75 pounds of fat, 25 pounds of muscle. And she did this, she didn't resistance train. And that's very important that you understand that. Okay. This was just through diet intervention alone. And also, because she didn't resistance train, the amount of protein that she was having in her diet didn't really make a difference. Okay. Now she's 150 pounds, but instead of being 150 pounds and 150 pounds of muscle, she's 150 pounds and she only has 125 pounds of muscle. Over the next 2 years, she puts the weight back on. Now she's 250 again. But the problem is now she's 250 at 125 pounds of muscle, not at 150 pounds of muscle, which means that when she tries to lose the weight again, it's now much, 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 much harder, because at 250, she has 25 pounds less muscle than she did at the first time that she was at 250. That is why it gets, and then she just repeats this process. She goes from 250 down to 250 down to 150, but instead of being 150 at 125 pounds of muscle, now she's 100 pounds of muscle. And then she repeats that, and then she puts the weight back on, then she goes right. So every time that Kelly diets down without resistance training and without eating a high protein diet, she loses a bunch of muscle. And when she puts the weight back on, she doesn't put that muscle back on, she puts it all back on in fat. All right. This is why when you are losing weight, if we are trying to maintain as much muscle tissue as possible, you must be resistance training and having that high-ish protein diet. All right. But that is how most people have a hard time getting the weight off third time, fourth time, fifth time. And they also why they have a hard time maintaining their progress. All right. Why is protein important for muscle building? I mean, in the grand scheme of things, I can't imagine that anyone really questions protein and muscle building. Having said that, there are a few key points. You cannot easily build muscle without an excess amount of protein. It can be done, but it's very difficult and bordering on almost futile for most people. And while you might be able to build the muscle without an excess amount of protein, you won't be able to keep that muscle. All right. Protein is anabolic. Generally speaking, in your body, there are two states that you tend to fluctuate between. You cannot be in both of these states because they are both counter to each other. They're both opposites to each other. Those states are referred to as catabolic and anabolic. Catabolic means to break down. This is you burning calories. So this is you working out. This is you at 3 o'clock in the morning, after you've just been sleeping for a couple hours. This is you fasted, right? Catabolic, breakdown. Anabolic means to build. So after you're done eating, you're anabolic, okay? Because you're building tissue, you're repairing tissue. The action of eating more protein literally helps your body make the hormones to build things. What that means is protein is anabolic in the sense that it increases, just by eating more protein, you increase all of the hormones that are going to help you repair and build new things. That's what that means. All right. I mean, honestly, I don't think anyone really questions whether or not protein is important for muscle building. The big question is, how much protein do I need to eat to build muscle? And we're going to answer that in a couple minutes. Why is protein important for longevity and anti-aging? As age goes up, anabolic hormones go down. So again, your anabolic hormones, those are the hormones that help you build new muscle tissue and that help you repair damage, injuries, stuff like that. Right. You can also think about anabolic as repairing injuries. So if you are injured, you want to be anabolic. You don't want to be catabolic. You want to be repairing that tissue. You want to be really rebuilding new tissue, right? So as age goes up, anabolic hormones go down. Therefore, the older you are, the more protein you need. A lot of times we don't talk about this because it's so difficult just to get somebody to a baseline protein intake that they should be consuming, let alone what an 80-year-old should be consuming. All right. But yes, as age goes up, protein intake should also go up. This will help prevent sarcopenia. So sarcopenia is the loss of muscle related to aging. Okay, and statistics, the science about this depends on which study you read, but generally speaking, every year after the age of 40, you lose muscle tissue. Sometimes it's referred to as a pound of muscle tissue. Sometimes it's 1% of your body weight. There's a bunch of different statistics out there, but your take-home point is over the age of 40, you lose muscle tissue, and really you're losing muscle tissue after the age of 30, but really it starts to hit you after the age of 40. We won't go into the reasons why here because it's a whole other presentation, but eating a diet higher in protein helps to offset that loss. Cognitive decline. As we get older, unfortunately our mind starts to decline, right? Neurotransmitters decline with age. These chemicals are made from amino acids, and we get amino acids from protein. So the more protein we consume, the more amino acids are available to our body. The more amino acids are available to our body, the more neurotransmitters we can make. The more neurotransmitters we make, the better our cognition. And really, the better everything functions in the body. Okay. And finally, why is protein important for longevity, anti-aging? Is C, muscle building, right? You should always be trying to build muscle as you get older, because the alternative of trying. So basically, you have three things that are going to happen. You're going to build muscle, you're going to keep muscle, or you're going to lose muscle as you get older. If I focus on always trying to build muscle, by default, I'm also focusing on trying to maintain my muscle. If I focus on just trying to maintain my muscle, a lot of times I will lose muscle. All right. So that's why as we get older, we always want to be focusing on trying to build new muscle, more muscle, because if we focus on that goal, we're automatically achieving the goal of maintaining our muscle mass, right? Versus if we focus on maintaining our muscle mass, a lot of times we're going to lose muscle mass in that process. Not all the time. Jamie's great at maintaining her muscle mass, but a lot of times that happens. All right, animal versus plant protein. Again, this could be a whole nother presentation. I don't want to keep you guys here too long. Generally speaking, animal protein is better. Okay, there I said it. Don't hate me. That's just what the science and research says. Why is animal protein better than plant protein? Better digestibility. All right. The easier it is for your body to digest a particular food, the more energy you can get from that food. In general, the better a particular food is to digest, the easier it is for your body to digest that food, the better. All right. So it is much easier for your body to digest animal protein than it is to digest plant protein. Okay. Anytime that you have plant protein, it's almost always going to have some carbs associated with it. Whereas when you have animal protein, there's no carbs associated with it. So a lot of times with animal protein, you're just going to get so for instance, if you eat skinless, boneless chicken breasts, it's going to be like 95% protein, 5% carbs and fat. All right. If you get your plant protein from beans, those beans are going to give you some protein, but they're also going to give you a bunch of carbohydrates with those beans. All right. So that's what I mean by carbs tend to be associated with plant protein. Plant-based protein diets always have to have more activity than animal-based protein diets. This is because a plant-based protein diet has a higher amount of carbohydrates in it than an animal-based protein diet. That higher amount of carbohydrates means that you must move more to burn those carbs off in order to see the same result. Okay. All animal protein is considered a complete protein source versus very few plant proteins are. A complete protein source means that that particular item of food gives you all of your essential amino acids that you need. All right. So all animal protein is considered complete protein because you get all of the amino acids that you need. Whereas certain types of plant proteins, actually almost all plant proteins, they lack certain amino acids, which is often why when you're eating plant proteins, you have to do some protein combining, meaning you have to eat like rice and beans because rice gives you certain amino acids that beans don't, and beans give you certain amino acids that rice doesn't, right? Um, so if you eat animal protein over plant protein, you're gonna be better off. The more plant protein you consume, the more protein you have to consume in general. Again, this is just because of the bioavailability of plant protein versus animal protein. All right. Um, Anytime that somebody comes to us and they're like, "Hey, I'm a vegetarian or a vegan," protein is always going to be an issue with them. Sneaky ways, sneaky ways to get more protein in. We got a couple sneaky ways. First of all, count your protein. Sometimes we'll talking to someone and they're like, "Yeah, I only eat 100 grams of protein," and they go, "Listen, I want you to count your protein from everything." And then they come back and they're like, "Oh, actually, I eat 125 grams of protein because the extra 25 grams of protein, I was getting a little bit from my vegetables and I was getting a little bit from my carbs and a little bit from my, so count all your protein. All right. In terms of how to do that, you want to watch the last video that I did, which was on how to figure out your maintenance calories. So that talks about how to figure out your protein intake. Okay. How to count your calories, figure out your protein intake. So that's the first way. Is if you don't think you're getting enough protein, let's make sure. Let's see how much protein you're getting. All right. And you're going to count it from everything, the bread, the veggies, the nuts, add it all in there. All right. You're probably higher protein intake than you think. Okay. Protein shakes are a lifesaver for anyone trying to get more than 150 grams of protein per day. Okay. Shellfish, shrimp, crab, lobster, lean red meat, and poultry tend to have the highest protein per unit. When I talk about protein, I'm specifically talking about lean protein, not fatty protein. So lean protein, for instance, in like a hamburger meat would be like 93% lean or 95% lean. It would not be 80% lean. 80% lean hamburger would not be classified as a lean protein. All right. So when you are looking at red meat specifically, you want to make sure that you're looking at that fat to protein ratio, and you want to have those fat calories be as absolutely low as possible. So in essence, I'm telling you to get red meat that has a low amount of marbling, has a high amount of protein, low amount of fat, and typically it's not going to taste as good as red meat with a high amount of fat. All right, because fat equals flavor. Bone broth. This is a really sneaky, tricky way. Bone broth has 80 calories for 20 grams of protein. It's awesome. Tastes pretty good. That's like 8 ounces, great on a cold day. Protein in coffee. I think I actually hit that on this one. I think I do. Protein in coffee is a sneaky little way. It doesn't add a lot, but it will add up over time, right? All right, some other sneaky ways. Egg whites and oatmeal. Stir them in while cooking, makes it creamy, adds protein. You're not really going to taste the egg whites because they're pretty bland. They don't really taste like anything. Greek yogurt in recipes. Greek yogurt in recipes, you're going to swap out the mayo in these recipes. So like, let's say you're making like chicken or tuna salad, you could use Greek yogurt versus mayo. Protein cereal, totally doable for a lot of people. Magic Spoon or Premier Protein have higher protein versions. High protein tortillas or wraps, sneaky way. Protein pasta instead of regular pasta. Edamame or chickpeas. Beef jerky. Beef jerky is like a go-to. A lot of times I will have packs of beef jerky around. All right. You do want zero sugar beef jerky. Tillamook is usually what we get. So beef jerky is great. You don't want to do the meat sticks. Okay. You want specifically the beef jerky because the meat sticks will be higher in fat. Fairlife or Core Power Milk. So these are just some pre-made protein shakes. Protein bars. If you do the protein shake or the protein bar, we want 20 grams of protein at the lowest amount of calories that you can get. I do give some other recommendations in here, but like a protein shake, we want 20 grams of protein for less than 130 calories. For a protein bar, we want 20 grams of protein for less than 220 calories. All right. Target has a great selection. Walmart has a great selection. Go there, try a bunch, pick out the ones you like, work them into your diet. And finally, certain types of cheese. This will be like one of the few times I'm going to tell you that cheese is actually fitting into your diet. All right, other than like cottage cheese. There's certain types of cheese that be very, very low fat cheese. So like string cheese or baby bell, right? Those are some sneaky ways. I wanted to post this. So this is taken right from the USDA. These are just hash browns. But check out down here, 4 grams of protein in your hash browns. I know it's not a lot, but like 4 grams of protein in your hash browns that you have for breakfast, with an extra 2 grams of protein from the apple. That's an extra 6 grams of protein. And let's say that you eat 3 times a day, and let's just say that you have 6 grams of protein unaccounted for at each meal. That's almost 20 grams of protein. That's a lot of protein for some of you. All right. So make sure that you are looking at all the foods that you're eating and tallying up that total number. Okay. What if you hate eating protein? Ah, sweet Jesus, sweet baby Jesus, you're gonna need some help. Um, you're gonna have a hard time reaching your goals. If you hate eating protein and you just have a really hard time doing it, you are gonna have a hard time reaching your goals. Doesn't mean it's impossible, but doesn't mean it's gonna be a lot harder. Okay. I was asked the question like, well, why do you hate the protein? Right. So if we have somebody who comes in, they're like, oh my God, I hate protein. And the first question I ask them is like, why? Is it the texture? Is it the flavor? Is it for like a social reason or a religious reason? Like, what's the deal? Right. Um, Sometimes it's just that they don't know how to cook it. And that's a thing, right? Where like you overcook chicken and it's tough and stringy. Okay. So sometimes it's just a cooking issue. Usually that's more my younger people that we deal with, not so much my older people. Um, can you do plant protein? Like generally speaking, if you don't want to do animal protein, we do plant protein. Great. Depending on how important your goals are, you might need to suck it up. All right. So if you're like, yeah, I don't like protein. I don't like animal protein, but I'm willing to eat uh, shrimp, or I'm willing to eat some chicken. Right. That's going to make your life a lot easier than just straight up. I do not want to eat animal protein. Okay. Um, we're going to talk about this, but you want to get to your lean body mass in protein intake if you hate eating protein. All right, protein recommendations. The current I already said this, but the current recommendations, the general blanket current recommendations are very low, with some being as low as 10% of total calories from protein, which is ridiculous. You are about 70% water. You're about 20 to 30% protein. So you're literally just made of water and protein for all intents and purposes. Okay. A great place to start for protein recommendations. I don't like blanket recommendations, but I will give you a great place to start. 1 gram per pound of lean body mass. You have to get your body fat assessment done in order to determine that. Another recommendation would be 0.6 to 0.8 grams per pound of body weight. That's a good one. Another recommendation would be 30% of total calories from protein. All right. So if you're eating 2,000 calories, you'd want 30% of those calories to come from protein. Those are all really, really, really great places to start. Another great place to start, or a great place to get to, is 1 gram per pound of body weight, or about 40% of your total calories from protein. That is the place where, like, man, if you can get to 40% of your calories from protein, and or 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, you're going to be in really, really good shape in terms of eating an adequate amount, in terms of eating an optimal amount of protein. That would mean that if you weigh 250 pounds, that's 250 grams of protein. Now, that's a little unreasonable, all right? We're probably not going to have somebody who's 250 pounds eat 250 grams of protein. There is a cutoff, okay? We usually cap protein intake for weight loss in severely obese clients at around 200 grams. So if you weigh more than 200 pounds, we're most likely going to cap your protein at 200 grams. So if you're 400 pounds, 200 grams of protein. If you're 300 pounds, 200 grams of protein. If you're 210 pounds, 200 grams of protein, right? That's probably where we're going to cap it. Now, as you get closer to 200, like, so for instance, let's say you're like 220, 230, we might have you actually eat 220 or 230 grams of protein, all right? But that's based on the individual, okay? Rough protein recommendations that I would give somebody directly working with us. All right. So these protein recommendations are just kind of like blanket, like somebody asked me a question on Facebook. I don't really have a lot of context. These are a little bit more of like the of a very average picture of what we give our clients to do. All right. Um, so this is what we will give to our members without any kind of context. Okay. So context changes all of these things. 3 meals per day, 2 protein shakes. Each meal is going to have at least 30 grams of protein, ideally 50 grams of protein. Each protein shake is going to have 20 grams of protein with less than 130 calories. And if you can do 50 grams of protein per meal with 2 protein shakes, that's about 180 grams of protein, 190 grams of protein. Man, that is like pro like if you can get to around 180, 190 grams of protein for practically everybody, like between the weights of like 170 and like 250, that's probably a really good protein intake for you to get to. Okay. How do you personalize your bro? This is the best question to ask. How do I the question isn't how many calories do you need to eat? The question is how much protein do you need to eat? The question is how many calories does Ben need to eat? Better question, how many calories is Ben eating right now? That's a great question. Better question, how many calories does Ben need to eat? Or how much protein does Ben need to eat? Better question, how much protein is Ben currently eating? All right. So this is very tricky because ultimately the real question is how much protein does Kelly or Kenny need to eat, right? So you're kind of asking a general question, but really you want a specific question. So let's give you a specific answer. There are three protein bases or goals that you can think about. Minimum protein intake. The minimum is enough to cover your nutritional bases. Ideal is enough protein where you're not losing muscle. Those are two different things. Minimum is not the amount of protein that you should be consuming to maintain your muscle. Minimum is the amount of protein you need to eat in order to just cover your nutritional basis. Ideal amount of protein is the amount of protein that you need to eat not to lose any muscle tissue. And then there's the optimal amount of protein. The optimal amount of protein is the amount of protein that you need to eat in order to see results. What kind of results? That really depends on the person. All right. But the results, whatever those results are that you want, are generally going to happen in between that ideal number and the optimal number. Right. So protein personalization. Blanket diet recommendations can work, just not that well for everyone. That's why we like to do personalized and customized nutrition coaching. Digestion is highly variable between individuals and between days. You do not digest 100% of what you eat. That changes daily by small numbers, but it does change. Your body might not, your body might need 150 grams of protein, but it has a problem digesting protein from specific types of foods. So you actually need to eat 180 grams of protein to give your body the 150 grams of protein. All right. So that's why protein is very personalized. Personalization will always beat generalization. All right. So let's talk about how do you specifically personalize your protein intake. The only way that you can there's two ways. One way is feelings. The other way is the way that I'm talking about. To truly personalize your protein intake, you must be getting body scans done. So we use something called an InBody. Okay. It gives us this printout. All right. It gives us a bunch of information about the person that does the InBody. So the particular body scan that you want done is you want something that's going to give you your body fat percentage. If you tell me that you're 200 pounds at 30% body fat, I can figure out how much muscle and how much fat you have. All right. We use an InBody. So that's the name of the machine that we use, InBody. But really, any professional scale will work. And I say professional, and what I specifically mean is expensive. Any expensive scale will work. So it's unlikely that the $200 scale that you have in your house is going to be the best thing for you to monitor your body fat percentage. It's okay. It's not terrible. It's just probably not the best thing. All right. For instance, our scale is $13,000. Okay. So you really want to get this done with a professional scale. A DEXA scan, an InBody, a bod pod. Those are all dunk tank. Those are all great ways to get that stuff done. Okay. This means that you probably can't easily afford one at your house. The model, if we do have somebody who like lives out in the middle of nowhere and it's just not realistic for them to get a scan done, then the at-home scale that we like, it's a $350 scale. That's the at-home model that we like. Okay. Usually for these tests, they're going to run you anywhere between $20 to $50 per test, sometimes a little bit more depending on the test. Like if you get a DEXA scan, might be $75 or $100 because they're going to give you a lot more information, right? And here's how it looks. So this is what an in-body looks like, right? So again, it gives us a bunch of information about you. And the big rocks in information, it tells us your body fat percentage, and that tells us how much muscle, how much fat you have, right? Okay. So how do you personalize your protein intake? First of all, you got to get that scan done. You can't just step on the scale. You have to literally look at how much muscle tissue you currently have. Okay. So you get the scan done. Let's say that your scan says that you have 150 pounds of lean body mass on you. All right. And let's just say that also says that you're like at 30% body fat. Okay. All right. You're going to track your calories and protein intake for a month. Yes, a month. It takes a long time to be able to figure out what is your optimal protein intake. Most of that is just based on inconsistencies of life. Okay. In terms of how to track your calories and how to figure out your protein, go back, watch the last video I did on calorie tracking 101. That's how to determine your baseline calorie intake. You're going to lift weight. You're going to do your normal things for that month. If you're not lifting weight and you're worried about how much protein you should be consuming, whew, that's a tough one. I would actually probably tell you to start lifting weights before you worry about how much protein intake you should be consuming. All right. So this particular how to figure out your protein intake is based off of you lifting weights. Okay. So lift weights, do your normal things for that month. Take the scan again. What does it say? Did your muscle go up, stay the same, or go down? So let's say that it stayed the same. So you're still 150 pounds of lean body mass at 30% body fat. Okay. Then what you've done is you figured out your ideal protein intake. You figured out the amount of protein that you need to eat every day in order to maintain your muscle mass. That's very powerful, right? Let's say that your protein intake, or let's say your lean body mass goes down. Let's say you go from 150 pounds of lean body mass down to 140 pounds of lean body mass. Okay, you've now figured out your minimum protein intake. In other words, you're not eating enough protein. Okay, you need to bump that up. Let's say that your lean body mass goes up. Excellent. That means that you built muscle in that month. That means that you figured out your optimal protein intake. Now, what do we do with those numbers, right? Well, first of all, what are your goals? Okay, are your goals to build muscle? Are your goals to lose weight? Are your goals longevity, right? Because ultimately what we do, how we tweak it is going to be based on your goals. But just kind of like a general recommendation, let's say that you are, let's put this into the context of weight loss, all right? Let's say that your muscle tissue goes down over the course of that month. But let's say you lose 10 pounds and your muscle tissue goes down by like 2 pounds. I would say stay the course, don't change anything. Let's say you lose 10 pounds in the month and your muscle tissue goes down by 50%. I would say you probably need to increase your protein intake. Let's say that you're trying to build muscle. Let's say that your muscle doesn't change in that month. I'd tell you to eat more protein. Let's say your muscle goes down in that month. I would tell you to eat more protein, right? Like a lot of this is going to be the same thing. There's an 80% likelihood I'm going to tell you to eat more protein. Okay. So it does really depend on your goals in terms of how you individualize it. But generally speaking, if you do need to adjust your protein, you're going to adjust your protein by 10 to 20%. So let's say you lost muscle tissue and you lost too much muscle tissue while you're trying to lose weight, then increase your protein by 10 to 20%. Let's say you're trying to build muscle and you didn't build any muscle during that month, increase your protein by 10 to 20%. Okay. Someone wanting to lose weight, build muscle, or live longer is going to be eating the same amount of protein on average. That's important. So you could really, whether your goal is to build muscle, lose weight, or live to be 150, you're probably going to be eating the same amount of protein on average. Now, if your goal is to build muscle, you're probably going to be eating a little bit more protein, maybe like, 20 to 50 grams more protein. But in general, protein intake, regardless of goal, in general, should stay the same. But calorie level should change. So for instance, weight loss, you're at a 40% protein intake at 1,800 calories. Let's say muscle building, you're at a 40% protein intake at 2,200 calories, right? So that's where the protein intake will stay the same. Or weight loss, you're at 1,800 calories, you're eating 180 grams of protein. Muscle building, you're at 1,800 calories and you're eating 200 grams of protein. That's another way you could look at it. Okay. What about feelings? What about feelings? For some people, you just can't get the scan done. Whether it's cost prohibitive, whether it's distance prohibitive, whether it's time, you just can't get it done. All right. Feelings generally are poor indicators of success versus data, but sometimes that's all we have to go off of is feelings, right? Protein is a game changer, a literal game changer, right? Like I said in the beginning, it's the biggest nutritional lever that when we pull, we get the best return on that effort, right? More dietary protein improves physical and mental health across the board. Eating more protein isn't just about weight loss. It's about you feeling better, right? About you feeling better mentally, emotionally, physically. It's not just about getting the weight off of you, right? So we want to help you feel awesome and help you be a better version of yourself by teaching you how to get more protein in. So this is why we're rolling out something we've never offered before. And this is going to be our free 14-day protein challenge. This is our first mini challenge in our Facebook group. Okay, you must be in the Facebook group to do this challenge. It is open to 20 people. You can't sign up yet. It is 100% free. All right. There are no upsells. There's nothing to do this. It is 100% free. That's also why we're capping it at 20 people because it's just the two of us. All right. It's going to start on Monday, September 8th. So not this Monday, September 8th. 2 Mondays from now. Within a few days of eating more protein, most people can feel a difference inside. Most people can feel a difference from a mental and an emotional standpoint. Within a few weeks, they start to notice a difference physical, right? The goal of the challenge is to help you feel better by helping you eat more protein. Coach Jamie and I are going to be working directly with you during these 14 weeks. Stay tuned. We got some more information coming that we're going to drop next week. But I do want to put this out there for anybody interested, right? If you are interested, again, we're only doing this for 20 people. We got like 3,500 people in our Facebook group. If you are interested in doing this, please send me a DM, a direct message, and I'll make sure that I put your name down as somebody who is kind of claiming one of those 20 spots. All right. All right, gang, that is Protein 101. If you have any questions about this, drop it down below in the comments. I'll get back to you. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned something. Stay tuned for that free 14-day protein challenge. And I hope you have a great day today.